Hi everyone and welcome to this week's Monday Memo. Now, if I or someone was to ask you what is your finance team's business model, that might sound like an odd question, but given that we oversee transactions flowing in and out of our organizations, and as a finance team the reason we're there is to provide or deliver something to our organizations, surely we should be able to describe what it is we do, to colleagues or new joiners or so on. And also, wouldn't it be nice to know whether or not what we were doing was perhaps of relevance, or if it was at risk of being outdated and not quite designed well enough to meet tomorrow's needs and expectations. Now, most of our audience are either part of a finance team or lead finance teams, or are involved in accounting and practices and working with entrepreneurs and so on. But when I've asked listeners to explain their finance business models, that's the rationale behind how their team creates, delivers and captures value, few can answer in a consistent and coherent fashion, even though they are experts of their own areas. They know finance and accounting inside out. And because everybody in the team doesn't have that common understanding of their basic business model, this means that there are many finance teams out there who are not actually pulling in the same direction. They're not delivering consistent value that they're capable of, and therefore they're at risk of gradually becoming irrelevant within their own organizations or in front of clients and customers. So the first thing to do, and the starting point really behind addressing this, or even having any good discussion about this, is to have a shared understanding of what a business model is. In effect, a common business model concept that everyone in the team understands, one that facilitates description and discussion. It starts from the same point. It's intuitive, as I said, has a common language, and makes it understandable, but not oversimplifying the complexities of the environments our modern finance organizations work in. So the concept or tool I'm referring to is the business model canvas, which has been more lately popularized by Strategizer. It can be described through 9 building blocks, and these building blocks show the logic of how a finance team intends to add value within their organizations, and it's a bit like a blueprint to show and ensure that you have the right elements in place to go about that value creation, capture and delivery. So those 9 building blocks start with 1, your customer segments. For whom are we creating value? Who are our most important customers? And all finance and accounting teams and practices should really understand that. Is it a particular part of the business? Is it another sub-function within finance? Who tends to be the ones that we sort of drop everything for to go and service? And then once we've defined our customer segments, then we look at the value propositions. What value do we deliver to those customers? What are the problems that we're trying to help solve? For instance, is it a case of helping them to get the job done? Is it risk reduction from helping them make better decisions? Is it based on giving them what they need for the lowest possible cost? Is it being accessible at all times during the day, or giving them new reports that are very convenient and usable that helps make better decisions? Again, so much to get in there and understand their own value propositions. But what are those things that differentiate us and give us that comparative advantage relative to other teams and functions out there? Now, obviously, that value's got to get to those customer segments somehow. So that's why we look at various channels on how we reach those. We look at how we're reaching them now. How are our channels integrated? Which ones work best? How do we raise awareness around the value that our finance teams can offer? How do we help our customers evaluate to know that they are receiving value? This is something some people call maybe branding. Are we delivering that value in the way that's best for our customers that they want? And how are we sort of closing the loop and providing good follow-up so we can understand if our value proposition is working and we're delivering the right level of value? And one way of, I suppose, facilitating those channels is to develop those relationships with the customers. So which customers have we got better, more established relationships with are they sort of costly or relatively inexpensive to maintain? Is it like a sort of dedicated service, like some parts of finance are dedicated to some parts of the business? Some other things that we offer, think about expense claims and so on, is a bit more self-service nowadays. With other teams, sometimes we've got to co-create value. And when you put all these things together, then you create a number of different value streams. What are those customer segments willing to pay for? How much is it costing them to interact with us? One thing we're seeing a lot more in finance nowadays is because a lot of finance leaders have a cost center mindset. Actually, the business is paying for finance resources that report up through to the CFO, happening more and more. That's a good indication of a customer's willingness to pay. Some finance teams are using charge-out methods, and some are using value logs to capture the value that they're delivering and making sure there's the right type of value for the business and it's flowing through to the bottom line. Now, none of this value would even start flowing if you didn't have the key resources to go and do that. And a lot of what we do in finance is more around the intellectual side of things, in terms of having that knowledge on how to deconstruct businesses, figure out the numbers and communicate that back in terms of helping organizations make better decisions. So there's also a huge human element in there. And also there's sometimes there's various different systems, ERPs, BI tools, analytics, data visualizations, of course Excel, that help us turn all of that into something of value and that can be delivered to our customers. And to deliver those value propositions, what are those key activities that we need to be doing? What sort of things are we having to do to produce that value? I mean, mostly what we do is really sort of helping the organizations solve problems, but some other processes could revolve around governance. Without good governance, you don't get that really strong foundation to be able to go and help solve problems in a more accurate manner. So again, within finance, the business model could be different depending on the team that you're looking at. And again, in an organization, we're part of a huge ecosystem. So who are our key partners? Who are those that we need to supply us information? That's why there's sometimes a lot of tension between support departments like IT and finance. Who owns the data? It's the business's data, but sometimes there's ownership issues. So how do we partner with others to help make sure we're doing the right thing within the business? And again, as we do those activities, form those key partnerships and also have those key resources, they lead to costs. So what are our most important costs that are inherent in our business model? Which ones, from a resource perspective, are the most expensive? Same from the activities. Are we more focused on value-driven outcomes, as sort of the more modern business partnering functions are? Or are we cost-driven, trying to reduce the cost per transaction, maximum automation, extensive outsourcing? As you can imagine, in a lot of finance teams, our biggest cost is probably our talent, our staff, our teams. And these 9 building blocks that form part of the business model canvas, and I share a link with this post as well, so you can go and check it out for yourself. It's quite a simple yet powerful tool to allow you to start to begin to understand, to improve, to communicate a finance team's business model. This will give you and your team a comparative advantage in today's and tomorrow's organization to help you understand where you go create, capture and deliver value. And that's why we bring guest mentors onto the show and interview them to help us understand how they've been creating value, how they put those building blocks in place, and we focus in and deconstruct on the relevant ones that are part of those conversations to help us understand what works, what doesn't, the hard lessons won, the quick wins, the low-hanging fruit we can go after. And the more and more we share those stories, the better way we can keep building our strength in the numbers. So look, hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, please remember to share it with your colleagues, friends. They can subscribe on all the major platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube and Spotify. And we really appreciate you investing your time with us today. So until next time, take care of yourselves and let's keep on building our strength in the numbers.